So I want to speak of Huda and Ace from Love Island, specifically because I find them to be interesting characters with obvious problematic tendencies. So from a psychological standpoint, I see Ace as an individual with avoidant tendencies and Huda as someone with anxious tendencies. I suspect that Ace had a thing for Huda initially, but to be honest, these two would be terrible together and they would find each other unbearable for many reasons. So when I saw that Ace is a Leo stellium and Huda is a Virgo stellium, it all started to make sense as to why these two individuals caught my attention and the public's attention. So Ace does come across very self-centered, ego-driven, arrogant, competitive, and leader-like, and Huda does come across very victim-minded, unable to acknowledge her shortcomings, and unaccountable and rigid. These two seem to be at the center stage of this season, and it's because when people are dominant in an energy, their problematic patterns tend to be amplified and much more visible. But anyways, going back to the avoidant and anxious patterns that I have noticed, I find Ace to be quite emotionally unavailable, self-centered, and overly strategic in a show that is meant to help you find love. Although there is a game and competitive aspect to the show, I find Ace to identify more with that specific part of the show as opposed to seeking a real connection. Ace has his head in the game, but definitely not his heart, and it shows. So Ace is overly calculated, and I doubt that he's the type who even believes in true love. I think it sounds good to him in theory, like for many avoidants, but I don't think he believes in investing all of his mental and emotional energy in finding true love. Now, that doesn't mean that he doesn't want to feel loved or cherished, because at the end of the day, he is a Leo. But I gather that his personal life story has a lot to do with his inability to open up and be emotionally available and vulnerable. So his avoidant mentality is the reason he was so quick to undermine some connections being made in the villa, and he used terms like love bombing and scamming to describe what he deemed to be connections being established too fast. To be fair, I don't believe that Jeremiah was necessarily love bombing Huda. I think they just naturally gravitated towards one another and let their instincts do the talking. This is usually what happens in overly passionate or lustful relationships. Now, one could argue that Ace felt a certain way about Jeremiah and Huda's connection because he was initially interested in Huda, but seeing how he moved into Villa with other prospects clearly indicates that the avoidant tendencies were there, and he wasn't as open to forming deep connections, in my opinion. So his favorite words were open to explore, which is a concept that avoidant individuals know too well because the idea of talking to multiple people and not putting your eggs in one basket is a safety tactic for them. An avoidant's worst nightmare is getting got and feeling like their emotional walls were broken down and someone finally got to them. You could even see it in Ace's posture and body language that he was not there to fall in love. He was there to play the game, to play it safe, and possibly win in the end. Now, Huda to me is the archetype of an overly anxious, insecure, and self-absorbed individual. I personally don't think that Huda is an inherently bad person, but she is incredibly toxic in the context of relationships and has very little capacity for self-reflection and accountability. So on a surface level, you could think that, oh, Huda is just trying to be loved, she's trying to find love, and she's a little passionate and falls too quickly. I think that people like Huda are attracted to drama and victimhood because that is the only way they recognize love. This probably goes back to the nature of her relationship with her primary caregivers or her first attachment figures. There is a template and mental representation of love that she is following and replicating because that is how love was internalized at a very young age. And like fighting had to be involved, manipulation had to be involved, and uncertainty had to be involved to feel loved. Like many anxiously attached individuals, I don't think Huda realizes that her attempts to feel loved are borderline emotionally abusive and extremely draining. A lot of what she does to get someone to like her is performative, in my opinion, because she doesn't believe deep down that her authentic self is enough. But the problem is that the mask always falls and the cracks start showing and her dysregulated nervous system takes center stage. If she stays with Chris long enough and likes him enough, I believe that the same behavior she displayed with Jeremiah will eventually be displayed with Chris. So in conclusion, Huda and Ace are two cast members that stood out to me and were interesting to psychoanalyze because in my opinion, both would greatly benefit from therapy.